Zuzabalaza, Zuzabalaza. My question. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Hi. We are on the graveyard session. Sure. But this panelist of mine, they will make us awake. It's time for us to talk about people's power. What is people's power? The panel will talk and give us their inputs, and then after the inputs, then we take it back to you there so that you can also give inputs. It's not about them, but it's all about us. They are going to start a discussion about the people's power. Welcome my panel. I will give each to say a bit who they are and where they come from.
Mpumalanga. Now my name is Thandi Tshaka from Free State in an organization called Botshabelo Unemployed Movement.
Hi everyone. Is this thing on?
Not part of this.
Okay, all right. All right. My name is Brighton Phiri. I'm from the Northwest province in a small town called Klerksdorp. I'm representing New Climate Vision, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Priyanka Naidoo. I'm a legal advisor at the Green Connection.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thumeka Magwangqana. I'm coming from Sinethemba Women's Organization in Marikana, the place of crisis, Northwest.
Okay. Thank you. You have heard my panel, and I have questions here that we'll be talking about, and there are 3 questions. And the reason of this is that we did have that march that happened on the 20th and then also on the 21st. That was all about the integrated resource plan and also communities raising their voice on the energy that needs to be used as energy that is community owned, and also saying no to the IRP that says we're still gonna have the load shedding the coming 5 years. And now we are talking about the people's power. And my first question is, what does people's power mean to you? And what would you like to see as a priority for the Climate Justice Coalition People's Power campaign? Over to you.
For me, people's power means we as the movement from different grassroots organizations, we have to be united, and we have to stand together and fight for the renewable green energy. By mobilizing and organizing ourselves in the community. Other thing is, I will say, can I please get the question where it ended?
Okay, it says, what does people's power mean to you? And what would you like to see as a priority for the Climate Justice Coalition's People's Power campaign?
I would like to see, as a priority, I would like to see CJC prioritizing the people's power to be a campaign maybe, or yeah, which will continue for a long time.
Thank you. Over to you, Brighton.
Yeah, for me, it goes back to communities. We believe in the bottom up approach. We believe in empowering societies and communities. So the paradigm has to shift from policies that are designed up there and then they are forced onto people. We have seen the problem with Komati. We've seen that solutions are created, but they're not tailor-made to suit communities and the crisis that communities are facing. So it has to be a paradigm that includes people, not only just consult, but involve people in the processes. It also means observing procedural justice when we are designing policies, when we are designing solutions for communities. So basically it means we're going back to communities. Every step of any policy should refer to people, should involve people, should make sure societies are heard. People's voices should be heard. I think in short for now. Let me just say that.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you. So I'm going to borrow some words from Amartya Sen, who described democracy as a demanding system. And when I think of people's power, I think of that demanding system. And I think we have a really wonderful example of that today outside the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. There are communities from the Wild Coast, both in and outside the court, demanding for their rights to be upheld and demanding for their voices to be heard. And I think that is a great example of how the linkages of struggles of people working sort of within the space who are anti-offshore oil and gas, or people who are in the climate justice movement. I think that is a great example of how people have come together and really shown what the value of mobilization and power is, and what that can achieve. And I think in terms of priorities for us is definitely to continue linking struggles and continue finding ways to find each other within the space.
Thank you, Priyanka. Over to you, Mam Thumeka.
Sure. It's on.
Just speak into it.
Oh, comrades. I was just forced to come and sit here. But I will try. Do you remember another year when there was a lot of rain? In Mozambique, there was a woman that gave birth while was on the tree. When I'm thinking of climate justice, I just always think of that woman. And we never told that how old is the child now and how is that woman doing. We need to be equipped about the things that are happening to other countries. And please forgive me, comrades. This is the first time I come here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mam Thumeka. The second question is all about building on the people's power marches against the flawed IRP. What would a people's energy plan look like for you?
I think people's energy plan should prioritize on renewable energy sources, the community di tlamehile di own the project. Kore di ske tsa ownwa ke di private companies. Le bona ba be le matla. They should have power. And they should have energy access and affordable marginalized communities, marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Brighton?
Yeah. When I think about your question, for me, I think about, we are in a state of crisis. We're in a climate crisis, and the RRP has to reflect that we are in a state of a crisis. It also means that it has to show the urgency for us to move towards renewables. There's a lot of inconsistency when you look at the policies. I was reading a report just yesterday. It's saying that South Africa is coming up with a new schedule for the decommissioning of plants. You notice that at one time it's like there's urgency to retire the coal plants. The next moment the RRP is saying something that's in an opposite direction. So that inconsistency is not showing the state of crisis that we are in. If we're saying we're in a climate crisis, it means that consistently there has to show in the policy to say we are moving towards this direction. We are moving against coal, and that should be consistent. But we don't see that now. When we talk about the just energy transition, when the just energy transition partnerships were announced, we felt that there's going to be some progress, but 3 years down the line we don't see that. So the RRP has to show that we need to urgently move towards renewables. We need to think about communities that are suffering from respiratory problems. We need to think about communities that are on the ground, that are exposed to the fossil fuel industry. We need to think about their rights. We need to think about their daily lives, their struggles, their daily struggles. Because when we forget about those people, we only think about policy that is not connected to the realities on the ground. Let me just say that for now.
Okay, thank you. Priyanka?
So I think a lot of us have been involved in the draft IRP process and commenting, and I think the one thing we can all agree on is that it's most definitely not a people's IRP. It's incredibly flawed. It doesn't address any of the problems such as load shedding, which it predicted to be with us until the next, I think it was 6 years from now, despite load shedding and our electricity crisis impacting every single person in this country and impacting people who are on the margins even more. So I wrote down 4 points of what I think a people's energy plan should look like. So I said that it essentially would mean an electricity generation plan that would not increase the pollution of our air, water, or deprive people of land. A plan that is also affordable for marginalized and vulnerable communities. A plan that creates sustainable, safe, and healthy jobs. And also electricity plan that will address our climate crisis.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thumeka?
As we are not working and we are not getting any salary, but at the end of the day, we must feed our children and our households. I think as we are here, we must be empowered. Ngendlela yokuthi sikwazi ukufuna ifunds, sikwazi ukufunda ukuzenzela, because alikho ixesha lokuthi sizayofundiswa kai unless the NGOs are helping us. But nabo ekugqibeleni zizophela ifunds. Kodwa if in our groups or in our organizations we are empowered to do or to deal about the energy crisis, I think izinto zizochinja. Yo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama Thumeka. The last question. What would it mean or look like to you for a government to truly reflect people's power and to be governed by and for the people?
For a government to truly reflect people's power and be governed by and for the people, it will be like accountability and responsibility in governance. Prioritizing of people needs and interest over corporate profits. And other, it will be, a representative leadership that reflect the diversity of the population.
Thank you. Brighton?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it basically means people's views, people's voices are reflected in the policies. We when we look at the Just Energy Transition partnership, you notice there was rushed decisions to embrace the partnerships, but after a while we noticed that it was more complicated than that. Then the government agencies start coming back to people to consult people, and then it gets even more complicated because as the people's voices have to be heard, it complicates whatever they agreed to. So those are some of the things that have to be avoided when we're talking about people power. When we're talking about reflection of people, it means that people have to be consulted first. Communities have to be heard first. Policies can't be rushed. Deals can't be rushed into. So it goes back to people's voices. It goes back to people's rights. It goes back to inclusivity. It goes back to procedural justice. Basically.
Thank you. Over to Priyanka.
Yeah, I think I definitely echo the sentiments of my other panelists. I think transparency was obviously a very big issue with the last IRP. There even energy experts, which I am not one of, looked at sort of the numbers and the cost estimates and couldn't understand how government had got to where it had got. And that is confusing for the wider public, who then has to trust that this is correct or that it's accurate and that the government's acting in the interest of the people who have elected it. So I definitely think transparency is a major thing. And also I think definitely procedural justice issues, but consultation has also become some sort of a tick box exercise with this government. It is absolutely horrific, the way that they are going about a lot of consultation processes. The IRP, despite it being flawed, still has not been rerun. We still have not seen what an updated version of it looks like. I think it then sort of makes the voices of mining impacted communities in particular even more marginalized, and the impacts that whatever chosen energy pathway that our government's currently going down on, it then excludes the most impacted people. So I think in terms of transparency and accountability, that needs to be reflected.
Thank you, Priyanka. Ma'am Thumeka?
I'm thinking our government doesn't know our work on the ground, or they know, they make as if they don't know. And if they know, they change all what we are doing on the ground and make as if it's their struggle. It's not. Kandi, it's not. It's our, and make as if it's their struggle. The activists are working far more than the government. If we can change and say all the activists must be on the must be working in the government sectors, the activists will win, and they will do greater than the government.
Thank you. From the questions that we have talked about, is there anything that you need to add that you think we didn't ask a question? Your last words, so that we can pass it to other people to contribute to the topic.
For me, I would say when we go back to the RP plan, you will notice that the energy mix that's being proposed is still not showing that we need to urgently go towards renewables. I think that becomes a problem when we look at, like I mentioned, the problems that societies are facing. We are in a climate crisis. The RRP has to show that we're in a crisis. It also has to take consideration of the societal problems that we have. I think she also mentioned that the issue of jobs. We have to look at how the plan can create jobs. I'm from the Northwest Province, and I tell you that over 56% of young people are unemployed. So when you look at the IRP plan, it has to be able to address that. It has to have a plan for young people to have jobs. It has to look at capacitating industries that are in the renewable sector value chain, because at this moment we are only talking about moving towards renewables, but we're not looking at the capacitating industries so that there's creation of jobs. So as long as it's not addressing the problems that societies are having in South Africa, then it's irrelevant. It's not a plan that we can embrace. Thank you.
Thank you. Priyanka?
Maybe I just want to add that I think the IRP process and the draft IRP is definitely one thing in the long list of governance issues in this country. So I'm sure you all know that the government hasn't actually done a proper IEP, so an integrated energy plan. And then the IRP is a sort of sub-plan of that. And without knowing what's in the bigger picture, you can't really do the smaller picture. And so the whole sort of domino effect of poor governance sort of comes all the way down there. But one thing I do want to encourage people to do, which my organization has done and was actually quite useful, is to have bilateral meetings with the DMRE. So this is different to just attending the public forum where they give general presentations, because in a bilateral, which is just you and someone from the DMRE, usually an energy planner if it's about the IRP, you're able to ask more pointed questions and to also understand what their thinking is and how they got to that process. And I think the more people who seem interested in the inner workings of this process, I think the more the DMRE might actually take a bit seriously public consultations and the way they publish information or share information. So that is something that they are open to. I will give them that. So yeah, I just want to encourage other organizations who maybe also just want to understand more. That is something to do.
Just to add as well, when communities or the civil society is involved, it means that it reduces the risk that you come up with a document or the government comes up with a document that we later reject. But if the process, like what she's mentioning, if the process is inclusive, it means that the end product is going to reflect the views of different stakeholders, including civil society. So I'm just echoing what she's saying, that the process has to be transparent and inclusive so that the end product already we will know what's in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Brighton. Thank you, Priyanka. Your last word, Mama Thumeka?
I think we are facing this climate crisis together. As the youth, I mean, as by youth, ingenamsebenzi, we also haven't got work. We don't work. The people that are voting for the government are the people that are suffering the most. I think if the government angabona ukuthi we are suffering and gave us pieces of land so that we can plow and kill the poverty in our communities, I think things will be better. For now, it is a crisis, and akondilungayo. We are trying, but there is nothing changed because of what we are facing.
Thank you to my panels. To add is that we need a shift in the economic and the social power so that we can all benefit in the government that is for the people and by the people. From the House, anyone to add? Yes, Uncle Sani.
So I'm thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just want to address the first question. If I understood it correctly, it was, what does people's power mean? So to me. So it's clean and renewable energy for all. It's enough energy for everyone. It's affordable energy for those who can pay. It's subsidized for those who are struggling. And it's free for the indigent. That's people's power. Energy that is not harmful to place, people, or nature. And then I, as a solar entrepreneur, or a solar practitioner, or a solar activist, say solar panels everywhere. And why I say that, of course, we mean renewable wind and hydro, wherever it is. But solar is the cheapest energy on the planet at the moment, the cheapest energy on the planet. South Africa is endowed with the third best solar irradiation on the planet. That means if you throw a solar panel anywhere in South Africa, it will make energy. But there are forces that are in opposition to that reality, simply because the traditional fossil fuel industry has so many points of extraction, whether you're mining, selling the coal, transporting the coal, washing the coal, wetting the coal, it doesn't matter. That's the points of extraction. But where are the points of extraction in sunlight?
Thank you, Uncle Sani. Sibe?
Thank you. Am I audible? Oh, I see. Okay, just to build on the point that has been made by Comrade Sani, I think, comrades, you have got to be very clear, right? And just to, say to Comrade Thumeka that we've got to be absolutely clear. What is happening in our communities, it is not because government doesn't understand. It's not because government doesn't see what is happening, right? The ANC and most of those people in parliament, many of them are drawn out from those communities. So let's be very clear about it. But also think that we must also be very clear that none of these issues are going to be resolved because we have more conversations, as if we are not moving forward because we have less conversations, right? Ultimately, what are we asking the capitalist class to do when we are really demanding transition to renewable? We are asking them to liquidate a capital to the amount of tens, if not hundreds of billions of rands. That is an enormous wealth for anybody to ask anyone and expect that they will yield simply because of the superiority of the logic of what is in it. Yeah. Right? It's just too much to ask for. So all of these things are going to come about because of the struggle of the living forces, and that means really shifting the balance of power in society in a way that is qualitatively different to what we are having today. And for us, if their power is their worth, is their monopoly over the private ownership of the economy and the political influence on the political establishment that comes with that, our power is our numbers. Our power is the masses of the working class people in their tens of millions that are marginalized in the regime of accumulation that is polluting our planet, and of course also making it impossible to transition, even when the interest of our common humanity depends on that transition. And therefore, I think that's very important because, Comrade Francina, I do think a conversation about people's power is how do we build a greater organization rooted in the struggles of the working class as the only force that ultimately can be able to overthrow the system and the cruel logic that means we would have more poverty and degradation of the environment and accumulation of the wealth at one pole and accumulation of more misery and suffering and poverty on the other. That is the only thing that I think for me should be, preoccupying us. And if we do have a meeting with the department, good, but it must be on the basis of negotiations of our demands based on power and power of our organizations and the struggles outside of those meetings.
Thank you, Comrade Sibey. Can we pass to Comrade Gillian first, and then...
It's hard to follow a unionist with his very good logic. I wanted to add that for me, that I think in terms of people's power, what it also looks like is about increasing energy efficiency and improving public transport, because these both have very strong opportunities to create more jobs and livelihoods. And it can also improve our standards of living. So it's not, for me, just about the electricity that we need, but it's about the opportunities, how to create more jobs and improve our homes and the way that we live.
Okay, can I go to Richard, then we go to Sfiso, and then we go to Babatem?
Thanks, comrade. And apologies that I was late and wasn't here for the introductions. I'm Richard Worthington. I work freelance and I'm an associate with Project 90 and SAFC. Just one thing about what we mean by people's power and priorities for campaigning. Access to electricity is all about the distribution level of the electricity system. The integrated resource plan totally preoccupied with big deal making. Basically, it's a mandate for the Montash agenda, big gas, etc. They're not really interested in electricity on the ground with people, and that happens through the distribution system, which is either the responsibility of Eskom or the local government. And so I do think it would be important to include strong demands about developing local government competence and support. So not just saying, we've got every local government has got to pull themselves together. We've been saying that for ages, but we need institutional capacity so that people's power is given effect at the level of the distribution system for electricity. And we need planning to not only look at the grid, but to look at off-grid opportunities like mini-grids. The research, including what came through at the workshop on socially owned renewables last year, was really clear that just putting solar home systems on individual households is not the most cost-effective way of delivering electricity, and it doesn't provide quality, reliable services over time because of the issues of servicing, etc. And mini-grids are looking like definitely the way to go for a lot of communities, and those offer lots of opportunities for social ownership. So I really do think I want to motivate that there's a strong component pushing for attention to what happens at the distribution level, the responsibilities of local government, and creating institutional support. I mean, the South African National Energy Development Institute is supposed to be doing this kind of stuff anyway, but is not being effective. So yeah, I would like to see that well covered in a People's Power campaign. Thanks.
Thank you. I've always had this question. I'm sure all of us comrades, we've experienced public participation process one way or the other. And you've seen how much of a shamble it is, how much our powers as communities, as civil society, is always clamped down. In most cases, by the rented crowd, who do not even understand that bill that's on the table at that particular time. Then what breaks my heart is knowing that the governing party once was looking for a space or a platform, a democratic space where they could voice out their concerns at that particular time. Now, them as the previously oppressed are now the oppressors, and they suppress any other voice. And the power, people's power, is really in a democratic space, in an ideal democratic space. It's power that comes from the bottom, because it's people that give the mandate to government to govern. But in reality, it's government that tells people what needs to be done. And in all court cases that civil society or communities have taken, even up to the apex court, government has lost on one base, that there was insufficient consultation. And that's very powerful, because consultation is not coming in and giving me a 90-page document in the morning and expect me to give you a mandate at the end by 2 o'clock.
Yes.
That's not meaningful participation. Meaningful participation as a person that died so that your voice could be heard. You should understand that we are now in a democratic dispensation. You should workshop people, because not all of us are legal minds. And here you are bringing a piece of legislation. For 3 hours, we're expecting me to give you a mandate. And then when it goes to constitutional master, it never passes. Now we are sitting with a piece of legislation that has never been amended by 4 houses of parliament, which is the MPRDA. What happens with people's power when a hungry stomach knows no law? They go and look for minerals not to enrich themselves. They call them zamazamas. They then bring the soldiers just because people are scrapping not to enrich themselves. Yes, there are criminal elements to it. But think about that person who works using a pick and a shovel, not to enrich themselves, but to put bread on the table.
Yeah.
That's people's power. That's what we must be working towards. But I'm glad that government at this particular moment is not talking about why we should formalize artisanal mining. Now the conversation is, how are we going to do it? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm going to have a shift of mind with this RP, because this is they say it is the third one. But I think there's a political outplay here, which is a technical play. In the first place, we should ask ourselves, where does the material come from that makes solar panels and these other renewable energy except the sun and the wind? Now, with minerals itself, now, there's a lot of time that has been hidden away from us. That's why there's a political ploy here. When we look at COVID time, and when you look at the time that people were not working and there was no movement, and then you ask yourself, how many mining licenses have been given or issued as extractives? And behind even the sense of notification to anybody. And when you look at the companies which are really working now on these extractives. And another thing, the extractions of more minerals from the tailings. There's a lot of minerals in the tailings, and how many of these companies are getting licenses for that? And this is the technical part of it, where they are playing us. They're bringing the bill, and not talking about the absence of time. That within that time of concentration, I think that the government is intensifying and strengthening the numbers of unemployment in this country. Because in the first place, when we say we want climate-free jobs, we say we're looking at the extractives that are being removed from the country. And we look at the tungsten, for instance, from the sand. How much sand is being transported internationally? And we look at the gaping holes of the ecology of our land, which has been left there. And not forgetting that the people have been forcefully removed from those places. And actually, these people have been relocated to places which are not commonly as they were used to be naturally, because there it means they've taken away the food security of the people, they've taken away the right of water, they've taken away of our domestic animals like cattle and sheep and grass and other food that we do. But now that during that time, how much damage has happened? Now the absence of that time factor, before we even come to consultation, we just see people mining and working, companies being registered. Because there was no proper consultation. But the thing is the honesty of the government, because the only thing that they are looking at, they're not looking at the expertise, where you first have to look at the education and school people in the country and our children towards technical educating. Because all these renewables, panels, when they come to South Africa, they go out as raw material. When they come back, they're ready-made for us to buy. Whenever we can say it is cheaper to buy a solar panel or to run that, but now, where does it come from? It comes from our land here. Now the thing is now, how much education are they educating our people, and which will can promote a lot of work?
Thank you, Prati. Can we pass it to
Okay,
Gabriel?
I'm getting emotional as well.
I think that's what Anita was mentioning earlier, is the emotion is important. It drives us. I think like the will of the people is what people's power is, literally to its definition. I think there are just 5 little points I'll mention is proper representation in decision-making spaces. Sometimes we are sold in our own spaces by those who are supposed to represent us. And so leadership looking like, cool, I can trust you to go without even checking in with you because I know that you've got me. I think oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where it's like, well, this is the best we're going to get, so let's just deal with it. But people's power is saying, no, if we are not represented meaningfully and properly, then we are not represented. Consider us without a voice. It's fully informed and meaningful public participation. I mean, we've heard it, and I think a big part about fully informed and meaningful public participation is it's not meaning dumb it down for us. Because by dumbing it down, oftentimes what happens is they take away all of the important information and they whitewash the papers to make it look a lot more presentable to people. What we do need, though, is deep analysis of these technical documents so that people can make decisions from a fully informed position. And then not lifting, but freeing people from the burden of injustice. I think oftentimes we don't acknowledge that, we don't acknowledge the fact that when we were having a conversation this morning at breakfast, it's perfect breakfast conversation, but about freeing people from burden. It's acknowledging the fact that if you ask someone to come somewhere, you cannot pretend as though they did not have a life that they are fighting for. Mom was talking now about, as activists, there's no jobs, You can't expect someone to come to a space, engage in a space, have their voice heard, without resources, without acknowledging for the fact that on that day, people were actually going to spend hustling to get money. And now you've asked them to come away from that hustle, to come and engage in your space. And my last 2 points, it's making sure that we are not only supporting current generations, but future generations as well. I mean, in consultation recently with a few young people, not only in South Africa, but we were discussing what does it actually look like, you know? The point of 30 years of democracy in South Africa came up, and it was like, cool, in 30 years' time, are we going to be talking about 60 years of democracy, and what does that look like? And we're still going to be talking about the same issues and injustices that we are facing. And then lastly, it's centering justice. And I think over the years, I've begun to truly begin to understand it, not even understand it, but begin to understand it, is that the word justice has been bastardized. And it's been captured. It's been ran around, and people have just been throwing it around. But truly, what does justice look like, and how do we center it? And so I think everything on top of what everyone else has said, I'm in agreement with. I mean, not everything, but I definitely think that without proper representation in those decision-making spaces, we are not led. We are not seeing the will of the people. If we are not fully informed and meaningfully engaged, we are not seeing the will of the people. If we are not free from the burdens of injustice, we are not seeing the will. As well as if we are not seeing a future and a present that is secured for all and centering justice.
Thank you, Gap. Over to Cleo, then Robert.
Thank you. As I've been listening to other speakers, I'm picking few things. One is that we are the ones as activists who must build for the future coming generation. Two, we are on our own. We don't have a government. Why one is saying we don't have a government? It's because I'll make few examples. We had a food crisis. As activists, we are the ones who came up with food cans and things like that. We had a problem with water. Amongst the activists, we are the ones who took initiative in doing research. How safe is our water to use? Where was our government in double checking all that? We as the activists, we are the ones who went risking to our lives, went to the mines to double check whether they are a registered entity or they have the right to do their work next to our areas. And only to find out some of the mines, they operate illegally, so while affecting us and not even giving back via the SMEs programs. So by saying so, comrades, one, we have to educate one another as activists, because we are the ones who are sitting on top of a pain or on top of a on-4 plate that is hot. No one will come from somewhere to do things for us. We have to do things on our own. If we want popular education Monday to Monday, January to January, we are the ones who have to do that popular education. If we want to push that we have or we access clean, safe, affordable energy for all, we are the ones who must push our government to at least give us a chance to show you how we can do this. We have a proof. Some of us here, we have solar that I've never experienced load shedding. Why our government can't say at least let's use power stations or all the stations that are demolished to make it a solar plant so that we can get a better life. So, comrades, in short, let's unite, educate one another, and protect one another. Because not all of us in the space or as activists, we are here with the same intentions. And I know that resources are a challenge. On the end, we will go to wrong doors and knock for resources, the resources that will hold our hands not to continue in protecting the future of our upcoming generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleo. Rob?
I think, comrades, thanks for really good points. I think particularly the point that ultimately power will concede nothing without a demand, and we have to build a community, workers, a massive, very powerful working class movement. But I'll talk about one of the things we want to fight for, I think, which lies at, one of the things that lies at the center of what is going wrong is who actually, whether you talk about ESCOM, in terms of the decision-making structures that actually decide our energy future, energy generation, transmission, all those systems, where are workers and communities represented in those structures in actually as formal parts of the decision-making? They're not. So those, I think part of it has to be firstly changing how ESCOM and the state operates, but secondly, I think challenging the private-led transition, because corporations are always going to be, companies rely on investors' money that are seeking a profit. Yeah. They're always going to, they might have some legal requirements that they have a little percentage for social ownership of an IPP, but they're always going to try and put in the least. And so the point is, I think we really need to be pushing, one, for ESCOM to be democratic again and have worker and community representation. Two is that the public sector ESCOM, government policy must not be leaving the transition to IPPs, embedded generation, to the private sector. It must be driven up by the public sector that can do things like, for example, if it's a worker and community-controlled ESCOM, it can decide, for example, in generating energy, where to buy the solar panels, under what conditions. For example, there must be fair labor conditions, that they must be locally made. If that's within the public sector under public control, those things are possible. If it's the private sector primarily generating energy, they're not going to do any of those things. So I think we really need to fight for a reclaiming of ESCOM, but secondly for actually the energy transition to be public-led and not private-led. Thank you. But then to do that, we need to build movements because that requires a lot of power, but we can get there. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Rob. Ma'am Thumeka.
I am very worried of what is happening in our South Africa. The people have no water. The people have no electricity. The people have no land. But the mining industries are invading the land. They are given this land. They are taking the other piece of land without consulting anybody. So it is time for us to stand up. If they are taking a piece of land, we take this. And then if they are asking, you have also no land here. How could you have a piece of land, many pieces of land, and our people are struggling to have land? So it's high time that we fight all these things corner to corner, so that they can see that we are worried of what is happening in our society. We thought they are here to invest. There is no thing of investment that they are doing. They are only here to invade. They are invaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Thumeka. Over to Alex.
Thanks very much, comrades. My input builds a bit off what Robert was saying. When we think about what does it mean to build people's power, I think one of the recognitions for us is not to be a passive citizenry that waits for the government to deliver legislation to us. So I think for us as the Climate Justice Coalition, perhaps what we should be asking ourselves is how do we take the active role? And we have been very active, but I think some of our work has been defensive, saying no to this, fighting this bad project, fighting this bad legislation, trying to improve that legislation. How do we maybe get to a point where we as a coalition are the ones that are coming up with a policy vision that are fighting for the things that we've designed, right? And I mentioned earlier briefly something called the Build Public Renewables Act. And this was something that was done in New York State. And this is where trade unions, community activists, energy justice activists, climate activists came together, and they crafted a policy that was saying, we are seeing this energy transition firstly not moving fast enough, it's not just enough, and it's being dominated by the private sector. And so what this bill that they created together and managed to pass together said was that actually this transition, we want it to be driven by our public utility acting in the name of our people and serving us in a way that's democratic. And we want it to move faster so that that public utility will invest in public renewables in a way that meets our climate targets on time. And we're behind on a lot of that. So I guess a question that I want to pose is, are we as a coalition ready to start actively driving policy in that way so that we can begin to set the agenda? And we can go to the likes of the EFF that claims that they want Eskom to be building renewables and say, this is in your manifesto. Are you ready to do this? We reject your clean coal nonsense and your gas, but this is a point that we can maybe work with you on. We can maybe go to the Rise Mzansis and say, you say climate is a priority, here's a bill that we want you to support with us, right? And we can try and see whether we can push the political parties to support our agenda rather than trying to get sort of the weak element of engaging with political parties where they hand down their manifestos to us. I think it's time we delivered our manifestos to them instead, right?
Thank you, Alex. Malik?
Yeah, guys, this is an excellent discussion. It's spurring a lot of ideas in my head. I maybe just have a question, not specifically to Sebe, but to everyone based on what Sebe was talking and what Alex just inputted now. You know, there's broad consensus that we need to build a large movement, right? Built up of the working class, built up of workers, built up of active citizens in this country who are interested in driving a more sustainable future for our country. But I do have a question about, you know, who's doing that and how? Cleo made a really good point that it needs to be us. But I would also challenge that, you know, this is something that we've been talking about needing to do for the last 10, 15 years. And it hasn't really culminated in a flashpoint. I'd like us to start interrogating what exactly is our role in doing that. There's lots of different movements, coalition spaces who are trying to build towards that. But I'd like us to start grappling with the hows and also challenging individual people here. We've got amazing people in this room. Figuring out what everyone's responsibility is in driving that. Is that all? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. Comrade Sube?
I missed some of the points, Comrade Malik, that you raised because I wanted to respond to.
So, for example, last week at a Palestine Solidarity Conference, they also spoke about the need to build a workers-led movement, community-led movement, based on thousands of people. But, you know, we've been saying that for 10, 15 years. It hasn't really culminated in a flashpoint. Why? What is it that we are missing? And what do we need to do?
No, I mean, I do think that, firstly, look, we come a long way with CJC, and I do think that we have made strides. I think when you look just at the composition of this gathering, tells you the milestones, right? The fact that we have significant representation of activists from working class communities who are engaged in organizing struggles, that is an important thing and so on. But I also think that we shouldn't set ourselves low standards. There are also lots of opportunities we have missed, lots of opportunities that we are continuing to miss. When you look at issues in respect of which we could really connect the plight of the working class and the policies and the logic of the system, in terms of how it impacts on the lives and worsening the cries of the working class, on issues in respect of which you can make an easy connections, right? The issues around loadshedding, the issues around the floods in Durban, but also there are a whole lot of issues that are coming out of the mining industry. One of the issues, for instance, that I gave an example with was like just concrete example, right? I said, where is our problem with regard to the workers, right? I spent, I think probably the past 15 years with, until recently actually, where I belong to a formal union and in which, I'm a president, but I was building grassroots movement that not only worked without official unions, but in many ways against the official union that I saw them out. It was a work, the work at Marikana, it was a work around Associates Fall and so on. And one of the issues I said, the problem with workers, with unions in those spaces, take NUM, whatever their rhetoric, the reality is the leadership has bought into the rhetoric of the fossil fuel industry, right? They are going to come here and say, we do support, but when you listen to everything else that they say, they're with the fossil fuel industry. NUMSA used to be progressive. And I know Comrade Ruth used to be one of those people that was actually our leading proponent and, articulated those decisions and so on. But NUMSA leadership has went rogue. We mustn't lie to ourselves about that. But there's a way that we can circumvent that, right? The concrete example I've given was there is now an ongoing case of the health impacts of coal on the mine workers. I know that Richard Boer is trying to do something, but if he doesn't, we have many law NGOs that are affiliated with us. If you go to a mine worker and say to him, look, coal is killing you, he knows it. You don't have to tell him. We want to bring a case against the coal miner to compensate you for your health, right? You, your communities, members of FM. There is no unionist that is ever going to convince a worker who knows that he's dying of coal, that he doesn't deserve the money. No unionist is going to do that. It doesn't matter how much they are loyal to that union. On the basis of that, you can be able to organize tens of thousands of mine workers in the coal industry, tens of thousands more in those mining affected communities, just around that case alone. But obviously it poses a question. If the issue of the health impact in terms of sulfur, right? Even the unions have resolutions on that. They can't get around it. If it's an ongoing health impact, then what's an alternative? Because you can't just say, we reject the health impact of coal, but we want to continue with coal. And that's why we're able to say to the mine workers, well, it is not only your health that this coal is damaging, it also damages the health of all the people on the planet because of the climate change and so on. We don't say people should not have electricity. We say we can have electricity that is clean, healthy, both to yourself and to the environment. You'll be having a captive audience. That's just one concrete example, Comrade Malik. But there are also many others. And in Limpopo, we're at who is this? Elton's community, right? With thousands of people demonstrating around the demands for just transition. Community members. And how did we connect with that? We connected with that with the struggles for the reopening of the mine, that is mining the PGMs, and we're able to say that, well, these PGMs are the raw materials in the green energy sources that we think will assist us in fighting climate change, but also for you as a community in fighting unemployment and lack of development and so on and so on. And we place ourselves at the forefront of the struggle and so on, which could have easily been hijacked because the typical pro-mining interests are also pro-fossil fuel interests. So there are many of these opportunities. We just need to consistently find concrete ways in which we can find an active orientation to them and make very active and practical connections between our agenda and, of course, the struggles that are taking place on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Sibey. Can you pass it to Rich?
Thanks, Com. What I want to say is in no way a response to what Sibey has been saying or in any way taking issue with it, but it's wanting to pick up on what Alex was saying earlier. There's a lot that can be covered by such a campaign, and battling narratives at the national level is something that we can't ignore. But in terms of things that people can relate to, I really do think energy service needs at the community level are something that can bring people together. And this idea that there could be for example, prototype piece of legislation or a prototype plan, exactly what it is, would be but the idea that there could be a proactive policy push or push for institutional development that will really empower people to engage within the electricity system, which is essential to all of us already, but becomes more essential as more and more services become associated with information technology, etc. So I just want to encourage that while we need to think about the questions that Malik asks about, how does one really get beyond talking about mass mobilization and make it happen, or be ready for it to happen, or look for the wave to surf, whatever it is. But that it would be really powerful to have a component of this campaign that really speaks to energy service needs in the household, and the things that we don't have to wait on national government, because I agree with Sabay, asking people who are invested in the fossil fuel industry to do the right thing is a hiding to nothing. They're not going to do it just because it's the right thing. They've shown their true colors for way long enough. And so having a solutions-oriented component for such a campaign, I think, is really powerful. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I pass it to Gabriel, and then I'll come to you. Gabriel here.
Over there. Sorry.
Cool. I do think, when we talk about how do we move it from theory to practical, a big thing is knowing what the practical is. Unfortunately, we keep saying, we must do it now! Okay, but then what is it? Oh, it's a mass mobilization. Okay, but what does it look like? We've been grappling, in Cape Town, we've got like an informal kind of grouping that still works to kind of organize protests and more. And this year was the first year that we, on 21 March, we saw different sectors of society mobilizing together. 2,000 people on the ground marching to Parliament. People fighting for gender justice, for food, water, energy, for global solidarity. People fighting for energy justice, coming together because we met them where they were. I think when we talk about how do we move from the theory to the practical, it's understanding, how, one, do we build that movement where people feel welcome to come into the climate justice space, because we were able to show these different organizations and these different movements how their struggle is directly affected by the climate justice movement, or the climate change in general. And then further from that, it was actually showing them, you actually know what it takes to see the alternative. And so I think something on the lines of what Comrade Alex is talking about showing that practical example of what can be, is needed. But beyond that, what we need to do is we need to start drawing links, very clear links between the climate crisis and the social injustices and economic injustices that we face. We say we're doing it, but are we really having those workshops? Are we actually engaging people in ways? One of the workshops, we were supposed to talk about the links between energy justice and climate justice, or energy poverty and climate change. We just spoke about loadshedding. And that was enough to get people to march, because we were able to say, we see you. We don't need to show you right now why it's a climate issue. What it is to you is, I'm struggling to feed my family because there's no way to cook food. I'm struggling to stay alive because the lights are dying in my community. People are getting murdered. And so it's literally just saying, don't come and join us. I'll come to you. Let us have a conversation. When you are ready, join us. In fact, we are joining you before you even join us. And so it's looking at how we begin to strengthen that space, but even more so, at the same time, whilst there's people mobilizing on the ground and doing that movement building, it's acknowledging that at a policy level, we also need to be able to be tackling those decisions, the corrupt decisions that are being pushed forward. And so a kind of decision like this, we've seen where young people developed the South African Youth Climate Action Plan a shoddy plan, love it, but love it not. It could have been better. But it is a good framework that we are working off of as young people in South Africa. And it is literally, this is what people want to do, how they want to do it. We went into schools, we went into communities, into after-school programs with young people in communities and engage them for this. And it does work because it's like a nice model to show government that young people know how to mobilize, we know how to organize. And we don't know what to do with it now, but if we were to develop some form of structural policy that says this is where we stand on, this is the foundation of our movement, and this is what you're going to put forward, and begin to make the parties actually work for us in the way that we want them to, I think we can start seeing that change that we need.
Ngiyabonga, comrade, just to hear what you said about people's attitude when we're talking about coal or the impact. Everything is there into the climate fire. The research that we did is the attitude that we find from the communities, from the workers, the unions, and the government and politicians. Once you ask them about the coal, I'm telling you guys, will get an attitude. No one wants to agree that coal damages our lives each and every day. No one wants to take a stand and say we need to decarbonize. Because of, once you talk about coal, other areas, they rely or they depend heavily in coal. They want to work. Even our youth, they are not working. They look at in the perspective of working at the mines. But when you tell them about the impacts of the coal, they give you an attitude. But thanks to hear that, comrade, because of, if we talk about that, I think other people, they will know it very, very well that our health comes first than the coal.
Comrade Farron or Comrade Alia, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, comrade. And I just wanted to say that I think people's power for me was well reflected in our people's power marches. And I think, as one example, because it was really led by all the different activities were really led by community activists in different provinces who know the communities where they are working, who are close to the communities where they are working and speak and deal and organize there on a daily basis, and are they were leading the campaign for a people's energy plan. So I think that we must also recognize where our power already is and how we can develop and build on the amazing strengths we have in the coalition. And I just made a few notes about the fact that mainstream values under capitalism are often anti-poor, right? We think how whatever brand clothes you have means somehow that you're valued more as a person. You're not allowed to sit outside the bank on the stoop there. There's a spike, so you can't sit, because I guess the idea is if you can't afford to sit in a restaurant, you may not sit, So I think it's really important for us in the coalition to embody the values of people's power, recognize that intellectual work isn't only being done in universities, but also in households surviving on 350 Rand a month, right? And that we can challenge those values that say that we should be ruled and other people should dictate how our society is organized. And part of that is internal work, is our work to say, actually, they've been telling me for all these years, we can't do things, right? Or that I don't know. But actually, and that's why I really like Comrade Alex's proposal about the legislation and us pushing for that, because why can't we do that? Why can't we say this is what the law should look like? We want government to be investing in public renewable energy driven by Eskom, like Comrade Rob was mentioning, because
we have these state assets, we have these expertise, why can't the majority direct and make sure that the benefits of those assets and expertise are distributed fairly across society and actually can be transformative and change some of the foundations of our society, which is based on racism, apartheid, colonialism, imperialism, sexism, ableism, anti-queer ideas. So I just wanted to put that out, that we have so much power, and that part of, I think, some of the work that we have to do so that we can create those flashpoints, that we can build the mass movements that comrades are talking about, is recognizing the talent in the room and how we can build on that and value it and drive our vision of what we want South Africa to look like. Thanks.
Can you pass to Comrade Alia?
Thanks, Francina. I didn't know why you asked Phiri and then me to speak, but when she started, I know why now. I apologize for coming late today, but I may have missed the beginning of the question, but I really like where the answers are going. And I think on the conversation of building power and what people's power mean, it really makes me think about it almost as an individual, as a household. I think we are used to talking about, like, from the systemic perspective, and we have to talk about the capitalist system, the neoliberal system. But if we talk about as individuals together coming here in this space, as households coming together in this space, what makes you feel powerful? When do you feel powerful? How do we lean on those moments, those emotions, those feelings, those psychologies? When I feel most powerful is not necessarily, and maybe this is, I don't know if it's more of, I don't want to say feminist or care-based kind of thinking framework, but I feel most powerful when I am cared for, when I am supported, when I am in solidarity with others. Personally, I don't always feel most powerful when I am fighting. But how do we lean on when all of us feel powerful and create that in a movement together? Are we caring for one another? Maybe not all of us feel the same level of powerfulness or the same level of power at all given time. So how do we support each other through time to feel powerful in this moment and future moments in collective solidarity, in our collective demands? So not about climate, but I think just how we move, how we mobilize, and how we organize in power and with our power and where we feel powerful. Thanks.
Thank you, Alia. Captain?
Yeah, just going back to your question, I think his question was saying, how do we mass mobilize, right? Basically. For me, I think we all have a role to play to keep learning and educating people in our circles. When you look at some concepts in our conversations, they are pretty technical. He mentioned the issue of the IPP model. We need to educate the people in our societies what it means or the implications of the IPP model. When we talk about, the energy transition, for us, we understand the energy transition. But for us to mobilize, the people we are mobilizing have to understand the meaning and what it means to them, or the repercussions or implications of an energy transition. So basically, I'm saying we need to keep learning. We still need to understand the IPP model. It's the implications, for the government, they're quite dire. The implications for the masses, so we all need to understand that, and we need to teach the people in our communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone. Unfortunately, we have to come to an end. Thank you for a rich, robust discussion about the people's power. Thank you for the contribution. Thank you very much to my panels. for taking part. And thank you, Mam Thumeka, for roping you at the last minute. Thank you very much.
Break now, comrades, and then when we come back, we're going to start breaking into a little bit more detailed discussions in different breakout groups, but we'll introduce those when we get back into the room in 15 minutes. So we can be back by 2:45, though. Thanks a lot.
So that's what we're recording for. Next time this happens, we'll definitely keep the PA in mind. It normally does work, but this one's a
I think it worked out okay.
Yeah, can you bring that box here?
That's mobilization goal. I say let us eat the rich. Legs first so they can't run. Goodbye.
This one. Yeah, that's cool. We can do them all now. I just want to get more of these with this microphone. Where is that microphone? I just want to get some of those, then we can leave. If you wouldn't mind just getting everything in.
Collect all the wires.
I steal your phone and then what? And then I steal your phone as it's open the bank app and I steal all the money, then what?
Never. You won't survive.
I'll run. And I'll take your money and I'll run.
Run and go where?
I will go for
Wait. If I was outside then I would agree to that. But not while I'm